Thank you, Sandra. I want to thank you for coming. I know after school, it's a hard gig, right? And I want to encourage you guys in the last 2 days of presentations, Thursday and Friday, to try to drag as many people in for after school as we can, especially because a lot of the people who rescheduled might be secretly thinking that they won't have many people if they do that. So I want to make sure we just pack the room with people who are. Yeah, exactly. I want to remind you to use technology responsibly in the presentation and to participate in the question and answer session that follows. That's a really valuable piece of the presentation as it allows people to explore their topic at depth. It allows us to see just how much they know about what they've researched. This is a fascinating and brave topic. When Monica approached me about wanting to do this topic, we talked a lot about breaking silence and breaking the code of silence in the culture. And I am so proud of you for sticking with it. So please give your full attention.
Imagine you're working in a 5-person household with 2 adults and 3 children. Every day you wake up at 6 a.m. to get the children ready for school. You make them breakfast and pack their lunches. You make the parents breakfast, and once they have eaten and left for work, you can then eat. You then wash the dishes and proceed to clean the house. You first clean the kitchen, then the living room, then the dining room, the 3 children's separate bedrooms, the parents' bedrooms, and the 5 bathrooms. This takes up the whole morning. The parents come back from work at 1 p.m. to have lunch. You cook for them. You then cook lunch for yourself, and then you do the dishes. Are you tired yet? Less than an hour later, the children come back from school and you make them lunch. That same evening, you also do the laundry and iron clothing for everyone. 7 p.m., you make dinner for the children and you cook for yourself. The parents come back from work and you make them dinner and wash the dishes afterwards. You later help the children organize their supplies for the next school day. Your work day ends, it's 9 p.m. This goes on for 5.5 days of the week. On Saturday at 12 a.m., you leave for home. You see your family Saturday afternoon and on Sunday. You leave your home for work at Monday at 7 a.m. The cycle then repeats itself. Hello, my name is Monica. This term, I researched the civil rights injustices that domestic workers face. The title of my presentation is Nuestras, Muchachas, fighting for the civil rights of domestic workers in the Dominican Republic. 6,000 pesos, or 131 US dollars. That is, on average, the amount of money a domestic worker earns per month in the Dominican Republic. As reported by the Oficina Nacional de Estadísticas, ONE, more than 230,000 women work as domestic workers. But in reality, most domestic workers are not documented in the census that generate these statistics. Domestic workers, better known as servicio or muchachas, have been part of Dominican culture for many centuries and have played a central role in the development of the modern Dominican household. But while these women spend around 132 hours a week away from their homes doing manual labor, their work goes by unrecognized and underpaid. Moreover, the labor-intensive hours they clock in are insufficient to provide the money to maintain themselves or their families. Having a domestic worker is easily accessible. Unfortunately, both the government and employers have yet to acknowledge the central role that domestics play. The laws relating to the working conditions of domestics, which are few, are rarely enforced. Domestics are underpaid and overworked. They lack government support, adequate Medicare, and social services. Because Dominican culture values money over time, domestic labor is not recognized as essential, which causes them to be underpaid. The Dominican Código de Trabajo y Normas Complementarias, a worker code, defines domestics as people who in an exclusive and consistent manner cook, clean, and assist employers at their homes. This código states all the laws pertaining each industry. There are only mention of 8 articles in this 202-page domestic workers. This worker code clearly shows the immense deficiency of laws pertaining to domestic workers. The laws listed in the Código de Trabajo are the following. The contract of a domestic worker is limited to the laws established in this worker code. 50% of a domestic worker's pay consists of room and board. A domestic A domestic's work is not subject to any hours, but they're entitled to have a 9-hour resting interval between working cycles. Domestic workers have the right to a weekly break of 36 hours between work weeks. Domestic workers have the right to 2 weeks of paid vacation after completing every year of service. Like any other Dominican who works in the month of December, their domestics receive the double amount of their monthly pay. All domestic workers have the right to assist school and go to the doctor as long as it is compatible with their agreed upon work schedule. If a domestic worker catches a disease or illness from one of the family members of his or her or the house he or she works in, then he or she has the right to receive the whole of his or her salary until his or her full reestablishment. Sadly, these are the only laws that specifically address domestic workers. There is no mention of minimum wages because there are none for domestic workers. Employers have the ability to pay as little as they agree upon with their domestic, and oftentimes this pay is dismal. There is no mention of pension funds because domestic service is classified as an informal job. There's also no mention of dismissal pay or notice, meaning that employers are legally allowed to fire their employees without notice or without a redundancy pay. There is also no paid pregnancy leave, despite the fact that 230,000 documented women work as domestic workers, not taking into account the thousands that are not accounted for. By law, they are neither entitled to social service nor health care, which makes it incredibly difficult for domestics to seek medical attention. While their laws are few, the ones that are established are rarely enforced or talked about. After conducting interviews with 3 domestic workers, I found that none of them knew that there was even a section in the Código de Trabajo that addressed domestics. Out of the 8 articles in this worker code, they all collectively knew Article 263 and Article 264, meaning that they did not know that they were entitled to a 9-hour rest period or any of the other laws. Later when asked, they confirmed that they were not given such rest periods. On top of not having sufficient laws, domestics are deprived of proper pay. The money they earn is insufficient to maintain a healthy life or a stable life. While the average domestic worker has a salary of 6,000 pesos per month, it has to be noted that many employers pay well below and above this rate. But the average of 6,000 pesos is not even enough for a family of 4 to eat with for a whole month. Take this as an example. The current market prices for the typical daily Dominican food intake are the following. A pound of rice is 25 pesos. A pound of beans is 40 pesos. A pound of chicken is 65 pesos. 1 plantain is 15 pesos, and 1 egg is 6 pesos. A family of 4 consumes a pound of rice, a pound of beans, and a pound of chicken in a day. A single person in that family eats 1 egg and 1 plantain. When calculated, a four-family person consumes 6,420 pesos worth of food in a 30-day month, which would be about 214 pesos in a day. While this is a bare bones diet, it is still not affordable for the average domestic worker. Unfortunately, this calculation only includes the food necessary to survive, but it does not include all the other food a household needs in order to be healthy. Most domestic workers have spouses or partners who economically contribute to the household, but frequently their jobs pay similarly or slightly better. Their joint income barely leaves room to pay for the care of their children, their home, in case that they have one, clothes, and medicine. Domestics are overworked. When you compare the amount of hours they clock in with the amount of money they make, it isn't possible to ignore the human rights injustice taking place. Joy Citron's article, La explotación de las empleadas domésticas, clearly shows this when it gives account of Soto, a former domestic worker. My eyes were spinning when I heard 40 pesos. I couldn't believe it. I didn't sleep that night because I was crying. I worked 11 hours for 40 pesos without eating. They didn't even give me a glass of water. With that abuse, that was the last time I cleaned. That was an armed assault. Less than $1 for more than 10 hours of labor. Soto's story sounds like an extreme, but many other domestic workers live through this every day. This is what happens when there is no established minimum wage for informal workers. There are 2 laws that address the working hours of domestics. The majority of the Article 261 and Article 262. The majority of the Dominican people do not know about this law. But even if people did abide by the law, the working hours are still abusive. How is it fair that the average person's workday is 9 hours, but a domestic worker's is 15 hours? Domestics are classified as informal workers. Therefore, they are excluded from the benefits the government gives to formal workers, meaning social service. It is impossible for domestics to prosper socially or economically when they lack government support in regard to Medicare and social services. Their salaries are rarely sufficient to buy flu medicine, let alone buy social services from the private sector. But we have to ask ourselves essential questions. Why is it that domestic work culture is so ingrained in Dominican society? Why do Dominicans rely so much on the manual labor of others, when all over North America, Europe, and Asia, households function without such? Julia Ringley provides an answer to these questions when she states, "The middle-class home, the great status symbol, would not be allowed to slip into total mess and disrepair. That only would demoralize the woman herself, but perhaps would also alienate her husband. Women with children have higher standards to maintain. They want to raise their children to be bright and emotionally secure. They do not want their children to suffer from their absence from the scene. These women have a powerful incentive to hire others to help. They also witness many others around them doing exactly that, so it becomes a new kind of norm in the urban middle-class communities, even among women who never grew up with domestics in their house." Julia's analysis somewhat addresses the thinking behind middle-class and upper-class women hiring domestics. It gives an explanation in terms of social standings, but it does not touch on why we need the domestic help. This, I feel, can only be attained by looking at domestic attitudes and cultures. Dominicans are known for loving a bargain. Domestic workers are a bargain, and ones that are sought after by everyone. When interviewing Isabela, an employer of 2 domestic workers, I asked her what she thought of her domestic salary and if she thought it was sufficient to live a healthy life. She answered honestly by saying that she knew that 2,000 pesos, the 12,000 pesos a month she paid her domestics, was not nearly enough to live. While she sympathized with her domestics, the salary she imposed was firm. I followed up by asking Isabela what she considered when generating a salary, and if her household budget allowed her to double her domestic's pay. This is what she answered. "Well, when deciding what to pay my muchachas, I consulted with people from my neighborhood and eventually decided to pay the same amount everyone in my neighborhood was paying." She then added, "Yes, I could pay my muchachas the double of their current salary. I couldn't really tell you why I don't. Maybe it's because everyone else would be paying half of what I would be." Most Dominicans' way of thinking is the same. They ask themselves, "Why do I have to do X when no one around me is doing it?" This way of thinking has inhibited the Dominican Republic's change. No one wants to initiate change, therefore change does not occur. In the recent years, change towards government support for domestics has been effectuated. The Dominican government has begun an initiative to provide free social service to domestic workers under SENASA, El Seguro Nacional, the DR's national social security provider. Prior to this initiative, domestics did not receive any aid from the government when it came to social services. SENASA's benefits include medical consultations, vaccinations, and medical emergency assistance. In 2015 alone, the government included 659 million pesos, 14 million US dollars in their budget to provide social security to 400,000 new potential integrants. But like with much of the money that circles around the Dominican government, this budget's physical effects have not completely been seen. While conducting research, it came to my attention that the number of affiliates who had joined were inconsistent. Some sources reported large numbers, such as 52,000, while others published small numbers, such as 621. And SENASA did not publish any numbers at all. The lack of available numbers and record keeping led me to conclude that the government is not doing a proper job of recording its affiliates, or it is not recording any affiliates at all. Another downfall of this initiative is its accessibility for registration. Sonia, a domestic worker I interviewed, has yet to become affiliated with SENASA, even after visiting the headquarters 3 times in the last 2 years. When talking about her experience trying to get affiliated, Sonia said, "They don't make it easy for us. We have to wait 7 hours in line, from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., and all for nothing. And look, we have to go during the weekdays and miss work. I gave them all my documents, and they said that they were going to call me back, but they never did. Till this day, I wait for this call." for their call. While this initiative is making huge strides towards the protection of domestic workers, more still has to be done. Their social service should not be the only thing addressed by the government. The lack of laws should be confronted as well. In order to address all the struggles domestic workers face and generate solutions for such, a national conversation has to be instigated. Now is the time for the Dominican people to fight for the rights of their own people, and this should be done by creating a national conversation. This conversation has to dissuade people from the idea that domestic workers are barbarians, and has to persuade that domestics are people who deserve fair rights like everyone else. This initiative will work to cement sympathy for domestics and simultaneously educate the Dominican people on the current situations that domestic workers face. In order for this movement to be successful, everyone has to partake in it. Employers, employees, and the whole of the Dominican population. It should be led by socially influential people who will share their advocacy for this issue very publicly, guaranteeing support from the general population. This conversation should take place in the form of television, radio, newspaper, the internet, and social media. This flexibility will allow an open discussion to emerge, a discussion that establishes shorter working periods, eliminating the possibility of a 15-hour workday, to fights for and establishes a more effective and reliable social service program, helps to create employer benefits, grants domestic worker women the right to have paid maternity leave without being fired, and protects domestics from being fired without notice or without receiving a redundancy pay. Having an open discussion will allow domestics to voice their opinions on what constitutes fair pay, acceptable working conditions, and adequate health care, making the proposal of solutions a non-discriminatory process. While experimental, this is the most viable solution towards solving domestic workers' civil rights injustices. There is no other way of solving problems that are not being spoken about. So naturally, we have to loudly project our voices if we want to bring justice to this group of people. Because eventually, once our voices are loud enough, the government will not be able to ignore the civil rights injustices that domestic workers face, forcing them to change the existing laws. Thank you. That's perfect. Any questions?
Considering this is a very controversial topic, especially in our culture, what inspired you to choose it?
What inspired me to choose this was I had a contact. Are you guys aware of the documentary Nana? Yes. Okay. So I know the director of the movie, and I previously heard about it before it came into the news, and I saw what she was doing. So I watched the trailer, and it made me really think about like the huge problem that this is in the Dominican Republic. So I wanted to find more information about it. Like I wanted to see if do these people really have laws? Like are they being enforced? Like how can we improve those laws? So that's what driving me.
And your suggestion for a national conversation and to create this movement, is there any such movement that actually already exists to your knowledge? Are there some advocates out there that are publicly speaking about this, or not really?
There are some advocates. New Sindicatos, which are, do you know what syndicates are?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like worker unions.
Uh-huh.
And New Sindicatos, where domestic workers have been recently emerging and I think it's the last couple of 5 years. I couldn't really tell you exactly the name right now, but I can tell you later. But yeah, while researching, I found about 6 or 7 sindicatos that are rising up to like demand better laws and better pay.
And who like comprises those groups? It's the workers themselves?
Yeah, it's the workers
okay.
themselves, yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. But is there anyone of like, I don't know, some sort of influence that you know of, like someone well known in the DR that is
no, that I'm not aware of.
No, other than like this documentary.
Yeah. That's the first time.
Slightly different.
Yeah, that's the first time that I've seen this problem addressed like more publicly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm going to build on what Ms. Lee is asking. I saw a presentation at the last TESOL conference I was at. It was about race and power in English language teaching, and it was a group of women who had made a pact when they were graduate students, women aged early 20s, to stick together as a group and support each other through trying to pursue professional excellence and professional recognition in the field. And through making that pact with each other, they had created change, because when each of them would hit hurdles, they would come to each other and brainstorm about how to get around it. And using their minds collectively, they were able to go much further. All of them are now tenured professors, which is really something if you look at the statistics. But I bring this up because one of their biggest points during the presentation was the necessity that people in underprivileged situations have for allies within the privileged classes. And they talked about how to be an effective ally for a woman of color who's in academia. Do you have any recommendations for how women women with higher social status here could become effective allies of the women who, or the domestic workers, male or female, who are fighting for legislation to ensure that they have fair wages and benefits?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I think that employers should begin doing this. So like if they have a domestic worker, they should reach out to them and tell them and like inform them firstly on the laws that they have and also on the laws that they don't have, so that domestics are aware they stand in. So then after everyone is informed, obviously, then I think that like employers as a group, after this national conversation has been like instigated and everyone's talking about this, then I think everyone should come together and be like, well, we're people. I mean, we deserve exactly what you deserve. So yeah, by like joining the groups and employers and employees, I think that together they can really make a change so that the government like hears their plea and the laws are changed.
Okay, so I'm going to push on that a little bit. The woman you interviewed who admitted that she could pay her domestic worker twice what she's paying her, she would start a union of employers that would, and she would start a conversation with the women in her neighborhood and say, we could afford to pay them twice as much, let's do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
What do you think the social repercussions of that would be, or the social, how would that fly? I don't have a perspective on this, I'm really asking as someone
Could
who's
you
part of
rephrase that?
this.
Sorry, like
What?
could you rephrase that?
So how will the women that she approaches to suggest this, how will they react to her if she makes this suggestion?
I mean, like knowing Dominican women in the social class we stand in, many of them will be shocked and they're gonna be thinking like, why are you getting yourself into this? Like, in a way, they would be saying you're getting your hands dirty. But what I don't know. I feel like we have to, like, a pivotal person should be targeted. Like a person that has influence, but yet is compassionate. So once we find that person, and that person who cares, like really shows what's going on. And this can be like showing what's going on could be seen like by even watching Nana, that you're aware of this is what's happening. And this is gonna like pull people's heartstrings. And everyone has compassion to some extent. So yeah.
That's an arguable point, but
Yeah, that's
I
like
wish that was true.
That's right.
Okay, so my question to you going forward, you don't have to answer this now, is can one person make social change happen? I think you're reading this book called The Tipping Point. I know a couple people have mentioned it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, maybe it's not about one superstar being like, I pay my domestic worker fairly, but about somebody, like unions of employers. Like, for example, to get radical, what if the Carol Morgan teaching community, the international teachers, decided to establish an employers union and pay a certain wage? And then the same question kind of comes in, what would their reaction be from, say, the non-American staff around the fact that we were doing wage inflation within the community of domestic workers? It's a little bit of a tricky problem, I think.
Was that a question or? Or
Well,
just to think about it?
I'm kind of asking you the same question again, like, if you create these unions, how do people react to that? Like within, should I try that? And if I do it, am I disrespecting the people I work with who are not on being
I
paid?
mean, arguably, it could be seen exactly like, let's say like the civil rights movement in the US. I mean, they're living under unjust conditions. Like, as I showed, the average salary isn't enough to even like live, like to eat healthy. So you're depriving these people of essential things. So I don't think it's a matter if you make this person angry. I mean, if that person, by working, doing their job and working like many hours that are unjust, like if you don't pay them because people would get mad at you, I don't think that's a just thing. I think that you should pay them as you morally see fit. Like if you want to pay them, obviously not arguing that you should pay them little, but if you do want to pay them more, then definitely do that. Because it doesn't matter what others say.
I had two questions. One was that, like, I watched the documentary Ghana. Throughout watching it, it became increasingly like familiar to me that the muchachas that work in our houses are like our family. And so, like, in your presentation, I saw the difference between formal and informal work. I was wondering if, I have two questions, if you could, like, what defines formal and informal work? And would you argue that being a muchacha, being a domestic worker could be formal work?
Yeah. From what I saw, being a formal worker consists of having a contract and one that establishes like specific working hours. Meaning, like for domestic workers, which are formal workers, it says that they have 9-hour resting periods or 36 hours in between weeks. But that's only specific towards like that you can't exceed more working time. But they don't say you have to work, let's say, Monday through Friday. While formal workers, those days are established. So it's mostly formal workers consist of from 9 a.m. to 5 or 8 a.m. to 5. So basically, it's workers that abide through the minimum wage. So there is a minimum wage for formal workers. So workers that do get the minimum wage, and then workers who do get contracts, while domestic workers don't get contracts. You had two questions on it.
And the other one was that, would you argue that domestic workers could be like categorized into formal labor?
I think definitely. I mean, if a formal worker is defined as a worker that has a contract, then why don't we just make contract for domestics? I mean, it's easy as that. Establish a minimum wage, which, I mean, it has to be done. It's unfair not to have a minimum wage. As you saw with the example of Soko, she worked, I think it was 11 hours, and she got paid less than a US dollar. I mean, that's simply not fair. So I think by establishing that contract and shifting them over to formal workers, then that would be the fair thing to do.
But like, how would you enforce that if people actually decide to pay a minimum wage? Like, yeah, of course, you can make a law saying that, okay, they're gonna be formal workers and have a minimum wage, but then there's other people who probably won't want to pay it or can't afford the minimum wage for the worker, but they want to work so they can go to work. So they'll just find someone else who will say like, okay, I'll work, and I know you won't pay me minimum wage, but I need to work, and you're gonna pay me that. So they'll be under no rights, but they need to work, and the person wants a worker. So, okay, how would you make a minimum wage for that people? Okay, how would the civil rights work around that situation?
Okay. I mean, that's a complicated person because it's up to the person. I mean, if the laws are established and a minimum wage is established, but you find a work that's going to pay you less, I mean, that's up to you basically, because like minimum wage is established. So if that person wants to pay you less, then you should be, well, no, I'm not gonna work for you, because there is a large market for domestic workers. A lot of families want to hire domestic workers. So it's up to you to find a family that would potentially pay the minimum wage. And let's say if you're currently working, if there is a minimum wage and you're working, and the people stop paying you the minimum wage, then what I would suggest, like, just go to the government. I mean, like, how do I say this? Una querella. Yeah, put a complaint, because now that the laws are established, I mean, you have a right to complain.
How do you plan to change? Because I know it's part of the culture. How do you plan to change the culture if it's so ingrained in us to have a domestic worker? And if we have a pivotal person, but this pivotal person, a whole population is very conservative, regarding this topic, change the mind of the whole other population who do have domestic workers, and they would not be willing to increase their wage.
Yeah, I think that part of the problem is going to take a long time to address. I don't think that with the current, let's say, the current generation that hires domestic workers, it's going to be really hard to change their minds. But while this movement is going to be helped through the media, younger people are now hearing about it, and they're being sympathetic towards the issue. So this isn't going to be something that's going to be addressed right now. But hopefully, once we're older, I mean, everyone will have it, like, it'll be conscious to everyone that they have to pay them correctly. So it's a thing that's going to be slowly entering our minds.
Yeah.
Anyone's other questions?
Do you think it's significant that there are no young men at this presentation?
Not really, because I didn't tell anyone.
But the two older women in the room, we both think it's interesting. Right?
Yes, I find it
I find it interesting. So.
Could I hear why?
Just because, I mean, the majority of, at least the domestic help in the household, typically is a woman, typically, yeah. So
Unless
there's
you
like a
have-
double inequity there, right?
Yeah. Unless it's more of like a gardener or
Sure.
a person who sleeps. So that would be more in like the top tier.
Can you go back to the slide you had with the long quote on it? And I would like to give my answer to that question.
This one?
Yeah. The middle class home, that great status symbol, cannot be allowed to slip into total mess and disrepair. That not only would demoralize the woman herself, but perhaps also would alienate her husband. Women with children have an even higher standards to maintain. They want to raise their children to be bright and emotionally secure. They do not want their children to suffer from their absence from the scene. These women have a powerful incentive. And then this is the part where I start to really question our discourse, because to hire others to help them. Like, I'm like, to speak clearly to your partner about the fact that you would like him to pick up his dirty socks off the floor for himself and help you cook the dinner, and also read to the children before bedtime. Like, I think it's really interesting that we jump to the idea that women need to hire outside help rather than creating a household where people share the responsibility for the home. And I think I love this connection, but the word eco in the ancient Greek means home. And so economy means the balancing the budget of the home, and ecology means the logic of the home, which I think is so important, because I think the health of the earth, the way we treat our homes and the way we treat the earth are fundamentally linked to that idea. Like, how we are treating the earth, like the products we buy and dump down our drains and throw away the trash, all of those questions are based on their ecological questions, not only economical questions. And they're questions that women have the power. We hold the power to make the change if we're the ones who are considered to be in charge of the home. If men and women work together in that space, we have a lot more chance for making change, both at the level of the small home and the big home, our earth. So I just think the root of the problem seems to be right there on that side, in that idea that the only choice we have is to, like, outsource it.
Yeah, because like it says that perhaps they would alienate her husband. So what? If you're lazy, then I don't want to be with you.
That's you know, and this is a good argument for moving to places where same-sex marriage is legal, because you get to live with someone who actually helps, right? It's like, but there is another alternative, which is to establish clear patterns of communication around shared responsibility in the home for both sexes. So that's my reason why I think it's interesting that there's, you know, it's a single gender presentation with the exception of the two men who are being paid.
Okay, come on.
I want to hear your opinion on my presentation.
I have a
Unlike
question.
the
I have a
topic.
question for you.
Yes.
What was the price we could pay for that girl?
Yeah, I think that question, that's the biggest question right now. And I don't know, I think this is what the conversation, this is why the conversation is essential, because it's going to include domestic workers, and like it's going to encourage them to actually speak and say like, well, this is what is necessary. And also we can take into account, let's say, the food necessary to eat. Like if we know that 6,000 pesos is not, like you can't even eat.
You can't even eat,
You can't even eat.
and
Like
those
I didn't
women,
even include water in that slide.
and those
I mean-
women pay house, pay
Children.
children,
Medicine.
school, medicine, and everything with six,
Exactly.
you know?
So I mean, this definitely is something that it's going to be hard to answer. I mean, I can't really answer it because I mean, I'm really young. I don't know what life consists of. Yeah. But yeah, I think it should also be compared with like formal workers' salary. I mean, I would say out of the top of my mind that per month they should at least be paid 25,000 pesos, 30,000 pesos,
25,000.
25,000.
It's too much. It's too much, you know?
I mean,
Drop 2 zeros and double it. It's the care of our homes.
It's
Like,
yeah, but
it's, I'm sorry, you guys, it's still
taking-
late.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
working.
that's right.
I mean, then if we would change it, then let's say we have to lessen the time they're in our homes. If we want to pay them less, then they have to do less work because it's not fair. I mean, they're working the law like says that it's okay to work 15-hour days. Most people don't even abide by that. Like they wake up at 6 a.m. and that's what I started my presentation with. And then they go to bed or to their room, not even to their bed at 9. But let's be honest, they don't. I mean,
But, Osha, I understand, like, I know that in the US and in Europe, the domestic working pay is a lot higher than here, but like, how would you try to impose that price if there are people willing to work for less?
okay. And that's
another one's question.
that's the thing, like, in order to solve this, we have to also solve the education in our country. I mean, ideally, we wouldn't have this problem. We wouldn't have more than 230,000 domestic workers documented. I mean, ideally, we wouldn't have that many number of domestics because people would take care of their homes. Referencing to that. So like, obviously, a lot of factors go into this. Education, like the environment you grow up in.
And the cultural norms around it.
Exactly.
I really like your phrase about you would be seen as getting your hands dirty. I want to start like a dirty hands league and be like let's like, because I do think like if the students at Carroll Morgan made a challenge to the teachers at Carroll Morgan and to their own parents and said, we want you to pay a minimum wage. We want you to establish a fair minimum wage for domestic workers. If that many people did it, you would have a chance of impacting the social conversation.
And this is possible, like establishing a minimum wage, it's very possible. 2 weeks ago in the newspaper, I even brought it up to Ms. Russell. 2 weeks ago, I saw that construction workers were given a minimum wage. Even if that minimum wage wasn't ideally the number that they should be given, it's still something that goes by. And if they aren't paid, at least that they can complain and they say, well, I mean, give me
There's a
my money.
standard.
Exactly, there's a standard. But if there's nothing to go by, then, I mean, I could literally pay 1 peso. Yeah.
We should do a showing of banana, and we should see how many people after we show them that are willing to have, like, you should do like
Like
a survey at the beginning, like how much do you think your nanny gets paid? And you put like a thing, and then afterward, how much do you think your nanny should get paid?
And then you should have a line on it that says, I commit to paying my domestic workers a fair wage for the rest of my life, and then have people sign it. And then you could do a research project where you collected the data and then got back to people through their
Graduating in a couple of days.
network in 20 years, and we're like, so
That's gonna
did
be
you
my
keep your
college
promise?
thesis.
Like, did we? No, I'm serious. Like, that's big data.
And what would this like 25,000 peso wage consist of? Because like I know that at least in my house they pay the workers an X amount, but they only go for like from the morning to the afternoon, and their medicine, everything is covered. Like, what would the wage consist of? Like money, or would it also consist of like the whole
Services.
the whole service? Because if it's in addition to the services.
Yeah, I understand that. And that's the thing, because like in the laws, those services that your family is giving them, they want to do that. I mean, they want to give that. But most domestic workers, they don't get that because the law does not establish them and people simply don't want to do it. So I mean, that's good for your domestic workers, but there are countless of others who don't get anything. So yours get it, but others need to find other ways to get it, and that money would provide them sufficient funds to actually get medicine, to feed their children.
So this money would include, would give them the access to those needs that my family gives the work.
Exactly. If your parents, let's say your domestic worker's child gets sick. Let's say my parents help my domestic worker out when her children get sick, and I mean that's something that I'm giving them. But ideally, they would get enough money so that they could do that themselves. And also, if Senasa would actually work, then they wouldn't actually have to do that. Yeah.
I was just, it's kind of a comment and a question. I mean, just, we have a nanny, and we offered when we first hired her to set her up with health insurance, and she refused it because if she accepted it, she would have access to better insurance herself, but her family would not, because I don't quite understand it. It was very complicated, but she ended up refusing the better services. She has a large family. She has 4 children, and I'm not sure if her husband works or not. So in any case, it's just, I think, I first of all want to compliment you for taking on what I think is a very courageous subject. Just to echo what Ms. Russell said, I think it's very timely, and I think you guys are the generation to do something about this. And with writing on the coattails of a documentary like Nana, which you and I discussed, doesn't quite hit on some of these more profound, deeper, critical questions, but it is looking at the relationship between the domestic workers and the children and the families, and of course that is to be honored, and I understand that on a personal level too. But there is definitely a lot to be improved here. But so much of this, and Ms. Russell was saying this, is about what is already like institutionalized cultural norms, and it's really hard to change those things, and I agree with you that it's going to take time. One question I do have, sort of lingering, is, and I don't know if you have any research on this or just from what you've seen growing up here, do you believe that having a domestic worker, such as a nanny in the house, is as much of a status symbol as it is a need here? Like, it's just sort of this automatic, of course I'm going to have a nanny.
Yeah. I think it used to be more of a status symbol before, but now I think it's more of a lazy factor. People just don't want to do things. And if they know that they're gonna get another person to do that for a really low amount of pay, then they ask themselves like, why can't they do it? Well, like, I'm not gonna do this if someone else can do this for a low price. And I wanna ask you about, sorry, did I answer your question?
No, yeah, you did.
Okay. I wanna ask you if the Social Security services you asked your nanny if she wanted.
Yeah.
Was that from the private sector, or was it, do you know if it was Sinasa?
I cannot remember. I would have to check with my husband, because he was really pushing for that. He wanted her to, have good services and,
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
And
maybe you help me, I just wanna check the math. So 25,000 is like 25 with 3 zeros after it, correct?
yeah, 25
And then you
years.
drop 2 zeros, which leaves you with 250, and then you double that to get an American exchange rate. That's about $500.
it would be a little more than $500.
So
Yeah.
Yes,
600.
do it in the calculator, Manu.
Okay.
The dollar is at 48.9 right now. 45.9, sorry.
45.9.
45.9. So
Yeah.
I mixed up the
No,
numbers.
we leave it alone to pay, but $504.
Yeah,
Okay, so I just want to offer you guys some perspective.
and that's not even,
Okay, so yeah, because you guys were like, that's too much.
Yeah.
But my son is working part-time at the college as a security guard for minimum wage at his college. He works 2 days a week, and he's pulling down almost twice that a month.
and you know what, I really
Twice
wanted to say 35,000. And I think that's still fair, but I mean, yeah.
So I'm not saying this to talk about my son or how great it is for him. What I'm saying is when we say that's too much, I understand you're saying that within a cultural context, but I just think if you pull back
Yeah,
and you look at
perspective.
comparatively, he walks around and checks some boilers.
Yeah.
It's not like he's caring for someone's children or someone's household, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that a question for me or Ms. Russell?
No, a comment about the thing. I was paying them. It kind of sounds like too much, but the thing is, like for most of the workers, for example, I don't know if every house does this, but in my house, you pay for their food, for their living, for more than a week, or like in my house, they have weekends, the weekends off, and then every week there's food, and then like the electricity bill that they consume and everything. So that amount of money would be considered part of what they get paid.
Yes, and by law, like the law does say it, that a domestic's like 50% of their salary, the second one, 50% of the salary consists of room and board, what they eat. But also, you have to take into consideration that these people have families. I mean, and most of these people have more than like 4 or 5 children, and also like they have to take care of their mothers who are taking care of their children in like a lot of cases. So yeah.
Because based on I'm pretty sure that with everything, with the cost of what I was telling you about, I'm pretty sure that the amount of money being in what they're paid and the salaries and the amount of money spent toward their living in the house and if they need healthcare and all that. I'm pretty sure that the salary, at least in my home or like in a home set up for that kind of package, I'm pretty sure it reaches like the 30.
I mean that's I think that's the hardest part of this. Like you can't, like I mean, you're a citizen of an upper class community, I would say, but like we can't base the laws on your examples. I mean, there are countless of others like that, countless of other domestic workers in the middle class or in like. Yeah, in those communities that don't receive those benefits, and we also have to take them into account.
But I think my question is.
And also, sorry, I just want to add to something that it also has to do on the working time, because Sarita said that her domestics don't stay don't stay,
30,000.
they don't sleep in their room. And also, that's what I was proposing before, that the minimum wage should be by hour. It shouldn't be by work day. So the amount you're being paid is consistent, like is parallel to the time you're working. Yeah. So like you wouldn't be paying them 30,000 a month. I mean, you would just make it so that the minimum wage would like meet what their needs for a month. And obviously, if they're working, let's say half a week, then that would make them need to get another job. But that's on them.
And something to consider is that formal workers are receiving their salary and benefits. It's not, oh, this is part of your salary, so we're gonna chop that part out. Just something to think about, you know?
And also we need to save money, and you can't save money on women.
Exactly.
And like, a lot, at least the people that work in my house, they're all like cousins and they all live in Barahona. Like other families are like 3 hours away. To get to Barahona, you know how much that was cost. To get like a decent ride to Barahona, not like in the cramped, like, you know, and like their families, like, they have huge families, and a lot of the nannies that have to leave their homes, they leave their children with like other people that they have an agreement, like, oh, I'll send this much money, but that money isn't just for the children, but also for the people taking care of their children. So it's like so much. Yeah,
I think it's so interesting too to think about the idea that we have made this distinction between formal and informal and skilled and unskilled. You know, what I was saying before is the economic logic of a household is skilled labor. It is a really, really hard job. So we empowering, changing the way we frame what is privileged work and what is unprivileged work in culture is really important.
Yeah, and what I find is that the definitions and like comparisons between formal and informal workers, while like this definition isn't explicit, but like most informal workers are uneducated people. So like, while it doesn't say it, it's categorizing people by education.
One last question. Do you, by any chance, know what the minimum wage for formal workers is?
When doing research, what I found was that it depends on the size of the company they work in. So for example, if they work in a company that has more than X amount of employees or does this job, then the pay is different. But I'm not exactly sure of it. I can talk to you about it later when I do more research.
No federal minimum wage.
No, there isn't one established for everything. It's different by like companies and trades. Okay.
Yes.